My third and last apartment in Miami, Florida. It's just crazy how it's been 3 years now since I went and got it. This story was really hard for me to tell with the mix of emotions and overwhelming and just overall not remembering everything as I haven't looked back. It's been really tough to tell this, but I will try the best I can. So, to begin, after leaving my second apartment, I wanted to get the hell out of there from the lockdowns, mask mandates, and curfews and what have you. I started doing a commentary on my old traveling videos the night before I left, sleeping on the floor. Then I went straight to Florida the day after turning in my keys. I had no hesitation. I didn't waste any time. So I got to Ocala and stayed with a family member. I was trying to look for an apartment anywhere I could in Florida, but it was really tough. I was rejected 30 times statewide because so many people were moving there, including myself, that landlords and real estate agents can afford to be picky, even people who were looking for a job, because so many people were moving there. So I didn't give up. I stayed dedicated. I kept trying and trying. Even had some of the harshest rejections where I was basically kicked out to the curb. But that didn't stop me. So there was an apartment I was looking for in Miami. Miami was one of my least priorities because of the rent. Like a standard rent at the time for a one bedroom in the downtown area was $1,500. And that was expensive, even in Miami standards for 2021. It's kind of funny how, like, back in 2019 when I had my first apartment in San Diego, all the people around me were saying, like, don't do it, it's too expensive, I can't afford it, you won't make it, it's too expensive. But it's funny how, like, today, now people make fun of you for not making enough money. Like a sheep, man, they don't make any sense. After I got the keys to my third apartment, after stacking up money and staying dedicated, I moved in June 1st, 2021. I believe the total for everything was $2,800 because of first and last month's rent with the extra security deposit and application fee. It was an in and out process. I remember every time I was at the leasing office, I was seeing the one person I was on the phone with a lot. She was a Spanish woman with big tits, like in a dress shirt with pulled up to where they were going to practically pop out. And I remember the goal was like to not get caught staring. Like they're right up in front of you and they're just right there, and it's Miami. I mean, what can you do? And so after signing the papers and paying everything, I had the keys and it felt like victory. Like I felt like all my hard work paid off. I was really happy and excited. I escaped the lockdowns and mask mandates. I had freedom over Fauciism, which was what Ron DeSantis said not long after I moved in. Like, Ron was the man. He really took good care of his state. Like, even today, it's still doing very well. I was actually there again last January on vacation, and I had a real great time. It really felt like America again, you know? Everybody was happy and walking on the streets. Everything was active. No crumbled infrastructure. No terrible homeless situation like California and New York or even here in Cincinnati. Like, it was doing well. And the best part was nobody talked about politics or inflation or any of that political bullshit you hear up north. Like, it was a real good time. Overall, when I got the keys, things were plummeting really quick. I remember, like, I was doing the Instacart deliveries and I was paid low wages to where I had enough to pay the rent and the bills and maybe some groceries, but nothing further. And that's how it is in Miami. If you're not wealthy, you're basically poor. And wow, that's like socialism. After like my 8th day moving in, this was when the bad luck begun. The power went out when I came home after having some poke bowls, which was actually the best pokies I've had in Miami and everywhere I've been to in that matter. They were so amazing. So I was trying to turn on the air conditioner and I discovered the power was off. And I was like, what's going on? And so I checked my power bill to see if I paid it, and it says I did. So then I called the landlord the next day, and they had maintenance coming in like 5 minutes, checking the breaker and all that stuff. Like, maintenance and the leasing office were very responsive, very friendly, very helpful. So when they found that I had no working air conditioner in that hot weather, they took me to like the complimentary or display room or whatever you call it, where like people who want to tour what it looks like, or what people live in there kind of area. So I got to stay there with some nice air conditioning, I think 68 degrees. I slept on the bunk bed on the bottom. I remember I had nightmares of shopping around the same store over and over looking for one item with a small house and nothing around it, as if I was trapped in a cage in that dream. Probably because I was sick of my delivery job. I really did start to hate it after a while. I wanted to get out for that reason. It just felt like running in a hamster wheel at a grocery store over and over and over looking for an item. Oh God, I don't miss that one bit. So after I got the power figured out, which was the leasing office writing my address wrong by a number, I was on speaker with the electric company and the leasing office, and when they told them the previous tenant's name, they told them that's who wasn't paying the bill and whatnot. I got the power shut off. And the next morning when I got settled in, I remember it was 8:30 a.m. and I heard this in my door. And I'm sleeping on the floor on an air mattress, so it took me a minute or two to get up. And I had no shirt on, and I'm half asleep, kind of like how I look now. And I opened the door, and I'm like this. And it was either an FBI agent or a marshal. And it was a straightforward cap, dark black shades, a standard t-shirt with no labels or anything, shorts, tennis shoes, socks about halfway up to the knee, with a big clipboard with a metal thing in the front of it and a giant walkie-talkie that was going off. And he was asking me if the previous tenant was still living here, and I told him, no, he don't live here no more. And then the guy said, is he out of state? And I was like, I'm not sure. And even though his shades were dark black, you could still see the eyes right through it, making eye contact at you without any movement whatsoever. And once I told him I don't know anything about that, he went down the stairs and said that's all I needed to know, and eventually got on the walkie-talkie and said, we're clear. And I was kind of curious as to how he got in, because it was a gated community like most of Miami, including the houses. So the only way to get in was a key card or a siren, as it was siren activated. And so this is where the fear begun. I was curious of this fucking dude, because like fucking FBI was at my door like a week after moving in. And so I was being a bad kid going through the letters that was coming in and shit. And I was telling people on messages about it, and they were like, dude, that's like fucking illegal as shit, man. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't know that. Great education system we have. They teach you a lot of things you need to know. Not. So after that, I was just like, what have I done? What have I done? It was like a Miami Vice crime kind of feeling. And I remember the next morning at 7:30 a.m., I would hear whoop, whoop, like sirens. And I look out the kitchen window, which is a view of the road and the parking lot. I would see 4 Miami police cars coming in, like heading towards my door. And I was like, oh shit. Because I thought like the FBI and the CIA were reading my messages and shit. I think I was just getting super paranoid at this point. So my leasing office is right here. The studio is right here. So I come down the stairs, kind of crouching down like Tom Vercetti in GTA Vice City. And as there were like 4 or 5 cop cars and police officers around, the landlord was pointing up a second floor window as if it was an everyday thing, basically saying, yeah, officers, there's a dead body in the second floor. That's where it is. And I was kind of sneaking away towards the grocery store next door. And I remember I look around and the cop cars are gone, but I had high anxiety for months after that. I remember when doing deliveries, I'd see cop cars at the end, and as I drive through, they finally pull up behind me and follow me for about a quarter of a mile to another neighborhood. I remember the same friends I was messaging were saying to me, dude, they don't give a fuck. They are got other things to worry about, like cocaine and cartels. They're not worried about some white kid with a Toyota. So my 3rd week moving in, that was when it was all gone. It was just another day. I was trying to look for bartending like I came down there for in the first place. But I was so focused on getting my rent and bills paid because I worked 10 hours a day and only made enough to pay the rent, bills, and slightly groceries. So if I missed a day, I'd be behind on rent. I'd be behind on bills. It was like fucking slavery and socialism. Like, you're working to the bone, and if you miss a day for whatever reason, you're fucked. I kind of forgot about it, and my third week, it was just another day. I'm driving along, heading to the store to pick up the order. My notification said your batch has been removed. Then the account said I was on suspicion because there was a lot of reports stolen groceries that year. Like, people were getting fucking weird. Like, I kept having reports like once or twice a week saying, you got notified saying that this customer didn't get their groceries and that you are close to deactivation. And I was getting a lot of them in 2021. Like, people were getting weird at this time. And so with enough of it, I got deactivated, and then I got kind of backfiring about it and said I demanded investigation. They told me they wouldn't do any further, and so they just deactivated me permanently after I said that. This was also the same day that building collapsed. It was about a 45-minute drive, actually. And so once I got there, it was Miami Beach, North Shore. I looked at the location, and I remember for about 1.5 miles or so, I was seeing cop cars and rescue cars from like Tampa, all around the states of Florida, even from as far as Alabama and Georgia. Like, the tri-state areas up north were all there helping. And when I got to the coastline to see the building collapse, they blocked the whole area off with caution tape to where nobody was allowed near the area. And you could see like a quarter of the piece of the building still there, and the rest of it just collapsed. And that was when I made a video on the same day talking about being deactivated on Instacart and making a couple other videos to get things off my mind. I did want to make a video kind of talking about how like all my fortune, all my gains, and all the battles I have won and worked my ass off for and collapsed like the rain. But unfortunately, I didn't really make a video talking about that because a family member said that it would kind of be insulting and disrespectful to talk about my situation as a building collapsing that killed over 100 people. But I didn't see it in that way. I viewed it just as the building collapsing, like my goals and gains. So that video didn't happen for that reason. So the same night I was praying like, well, what am I going to do for work? I got rent due in 2 weeks. So I prayed and prayed, and this chick coming along, we're walking and we're talking. And then she talks to me about the Tavern Oceanside Hotel needing bartenders. And even the bartender who just left, who was the closer, he said, yes, thank God, our Lord has answered our prayers, like shaking my hand and stuff. So I went in the next day, told him I would look for bartending. I told him I had no experience, but I know cocktails. Filled out some paperwork. Came in about a few days later. Bartended about less than a week. But I wasn't set up to win because of how understaffed it was, and I wasn't set up to win. I got a whole story about this video. I'll put it in the description. Let's just move on. So third week moving in, I was fired because apparently I wasn't catching up with cokeheads. So after that, I was a little devastated and confused, wondering like, am I really this shitty of a bartender to be fired this quickly? Because this is my first time in my entire life I've been fired. And so I kind of felt stupid and ashamed of myself. And an entrepreneur I knew in Connecticut told me, like, who cares if you failed? Get out there and try again now that you learned something. And another person I knew said, okay, cool, you got experience. Learn from it and move on. Like, I was getting all this motivation I needed, but I still felt a little shitty about myself. This was at that moment when the apartment started to grow more and more negative. Like, I had a hard time sleeping. I had a hard time remembering all the moments about it unless I look at pictures of it, which is another reason I have a hard time telling the story. So overall, it felt draining, soul-sucking, and colorless. Like, when I'm doing deliveries, I was barely making money because of oversaturation with drivers. And every time I did it, I didn't make more than like $70 a day. So I had to go up and down Fort Lauderdale over and over just to make enough money to like have groceries and possibly some bills paid. And when the rent for July was due, I managed to pay that month's rent with my credit card magically extending my credit to like $800 more, which was enough to pay rent. It felt as if the Lord and the universe was extending my stay. Like it was teaching me something. So after that, I had a hard time coming up with August rent, and I just had so much anxiety and fear and stress that I was losing who I was. I actually made a video talking about this too. I will also post that on the description below. So moving on, and just to cut to the chase, I was having a hard time making money, having a hard time finding another job, even if it was a grocery store at Publix, because of so many people moving there. Even showing desperation is like repellent in a spray can, basically. I was looking for bartending in Coral Gables, and Coral Gables just feels like it's really sick. I remember there was this one place, I can't remember the name, I think it was called the Blairs, and the guy there looked literally like Gavin Newsom. I actually have a video about that. I guess I'll post it below too. Basically, to make the long story short, the guy seemed interested at first and had me come in for an interview, and the person who was interviewing me didn't even know who I was or me coming there for an interview. He said, fuck it, you drove here, you showed up, you gave your time, we'll talk about making a mojito and normal single malt whiskeys and scotch. And when I answered every question confidently, he said to me, okay, we'll call you later for a second interview, which basically means they're dangling you out the string, which is cruel and shit, but I didn't really think much of it. So I came back to go see the guy again. He looked at me like this way, like he didn't know me, and I asked him if any position was open. He's like, no! If you've seen the Rugrats where, like, Mr. Foster, the parent, Chucky's dad, was having a nightmare about Stu, where he has that thing goes, I'm not Stu! It was literally like that. He was like, no! Yeah! And, like, all the people around me, like the workers and the customers, were looking at me weird as if I was being shamed. And it got to the point I just ran out of there in shame and kind of crying as I'm walking. It just felt really sick being there. And it was a hot August. Like, God, 10 a.m. it's 98 degrees when you wake up and the sun in your face. I was trying to play guitar on Ocean Drive for some scrap money. People loved it here and there. It was a little overwhelming playing in front of like 150 or 200 or more people all in one area, which can feel like 1,000 people, which I have on the description too. Jesus, I've made quite a handful of videos in Miami for a short amount of time I was there. It was sometime in late July or August. I was playing right outside the tourist areas of Ocean Drive. I wanted to kind of respect the people and the business on Ocean Drive's tourist areas and kind of play further away, so that way the tourism and the music can have their space and I have my space. So I kind of wanted to like respect them. So even at that area, there'd be like black chicks dancing around, flashing their tits at you. It was a really good time. But for some reason, people just don't like guitar players over there, because there was one night I had about 3 cops come up next to me saying that I had to leave and that it was city property. And I'm like, city property? What are you talking about? This is the fucking United States of America. You know, the land of the free. Where does it say I can't play here because of city property? Where in the Constitution and Bill of Rights does it say that? I've played in every city in America. LA, San Diego, San Francisco, Denver, Boston, New York City, Cincinnati, before I put a stop to it a few weeks ago. I've played practically all around the country, and only in Miami I get discriminated for it. It's literally taken over 30 attempts to make this story, so I'm going to show the part of the guitar clips I had in the apartment. And having no luck in the apartment, no luck with the job, no luck paying rent, no luck of anything, and soul sucking in that apartment, I was just like, I want to get the fuck out of this place. I remember like doing deliveries. I'd be driving on that road where you see the downtown skyline in the residential area. I literally felt like I was being drained and that my soul was being sucked away. And I remember this futon that I found not long after I got my bartending job. Sorry, I'm trying to get all this as much as I can. So after that futon I inspected it. No smell of piss, no mold, no nothing. It just seemed like a fat guy sat in the middle. There was that big hole and gap in the middle when trying to sleep on it. So a few months moving in, and I remember at night I'd be waking up at 3 a.m. and it didn't feel like a positive energy. The best I can describe it is this person had a human face but had all these paintings and markings around its eyes, like all kinds of weird colors. And it had an angry look, and it had horns and flames. I couldn't see it, but I can sense it in vibrations. As a person who believes in the paranormal, and everyone else would probably know what I'm talking about, like, you can't see it, but you can sense it's there. Like fire, symbols on the walls glowing red, a portal on the kitchen floor, and the mirror had a reflection of everything, mocking and laughing. There was one night, this was 2 days before I left. I'm getting the chills just retelling this. So it was 3 a.m. sleeping on the futon, and all around me I smelled like rotting carcass and maybe a bit of piss and flesh. And it felt really hot being in there, like fire all around every corner and lava bits sparkling around. And whatever that entity was watching me. And as I'm walking towards the hallway where the bathroom mirror is, whatever it was looking right at me. And it had the horns, bright glowing eyes. And it was a scream. I can't hear it, but I could sense it. And it was really high-pitched and ear-piercing to where, like, it's literally making you sick. And the more it kept screaming, the more it was making me sick and made me want to scream. Like, it was making me want to scream insanely. And as I'm sitting on top of the bathtub trying to puke my guts out because I was feeling sick, I couldn't puke. And it felt like I was having people laugh at me. And it was quite a scary moment. And this was between 3 and 4 a.m. And every night I got woken up, but it was getting worse and worse. And I remember the day after that, I met one of my neighbors below me, and him and I connected instantly. We were in that apartment smoking a bit of weed, playing guitar, talking about music, and it felt like a positive and happy flower vibe. And then when I talked to that guy the day I left, so as I'm doing deliveries, this was the part I forgot to add on the video. So the previous tenant that the FBI were looking for, the guy who lived below me when we were talking told me that he was apparently a whack job who managed to like lock himself inside of his apartment, and they would ask if he could borrow his credit card and stuff like that. And he would lock himself outside of his own apartment in the balcony, screaming like a demon at 3 a.m. like I mentioned, the apartment. And it was for so long that the cops had to show up and evict the guy, which was the reason the landlords evicted him in the first place. And I think whatever happened in that apartment might have made him go insane, and soon it was going to happen to me too. As to how long he was there, we don't really know, but apparently he was a small business owner. Actually, we'll just go in between that story. So I went to the leasing office and I said to her, like, hey, don't need to go explain. I don't know how to explain this, but I have no money coming in. I don't have a job lined up. I give up. I turn in the keys. I surrender. And the landlord was just like, yeah, don't worry about it. I was like, you're not mad? Nah, people leave all the time. It was as if she knew what was going on in that apartment but didn't want to openly admit it. It was like as if she knew one side that I didn't. And she was sending like eviction letters and shit. And so I remember she basically gave me the form to break the lease and said it won't affect my rental history. And then she said, turn in the keys whenever you're ready. And so I met the guy below who I'm talking about. Now we can get back to the story. So I asked him straight up, like, hey, can you investigate my apartment real quick and see if you feel anything strange? Because he was into paranormal activity and stuff too. And so he gets in, not even like 2 feet in the entrance, and he's looking around. He looks at the kitchen where that hallway and the bathroom mirror was. He was literally like this. His eyes were all the way open. He was leaning back a little bit. He didn't even say a word. He just ran down the stairs and bolted to the parking lot. And I had to go chase the guy. And as we were at my car, he looked up and down, left and right, and said, get the fuck out of there. And that was that. I do remember there was also that neighbor right next to me when she moved in not long before this. She had a real short dress going up a flight of stairs where I see her panties. Like she was really wanting to fuck. She was a horny neighbor. I didn't even see the signs because I was just so scared of that apartment. I remember when she would pull in, getting ready to go home, she'd be like, hey, hey! And I'd be like, I go! And she was probably just like, fucking dick. And I remember the last day when she was coming on to me, I told her I'm leaving. And actually when I met her, she said she was ultra liberal. And I was like, yeah, no. So after I signed the papers, turned the keys, I told the landlord that I would be leaving tonight. And they were already gone. So they said, yeah, just send us emails of the pictures of the apartment. And I was cleaning it. And before I deep cleaned it, here was my last video of the apartment. Yeah, the apartment's a mess. I'm still packing up my shit and about ready to clean up. Right here is where I slept when I first started. Nothing unusual. This is where I slept most of the time out of the futon. But every night I'm here, 3 a.m. I feel like somebody's either here, wherever. Especially at 3 a.m. See the mirror? At 3 a.m. I feel like something's just standing there looking right at me. And it is not happy that I'm here. It just basically says, get the fuck out. That video is nostalgia to me. So many things are running through my head seeing that. So after I cleaned it spotless, the landlords were very impressed with how clean it was. They said they were ready to get to the next tenant. And once I turn in the key on the kitchen counter, I get in the car and I drive forward in front of the gate. And I'm getting gas at the grocery store next to it, the gas station in front of it. I see like a dark cloud with lightning and thunder, like a black hole on top where my apartment was. And then as I'm looking at that long road, even though it was only like 300 feet away, it just felt like it was getting farther and farther and farther and farther and farther and farther the longer I was staring at it. But then it just came to my senses once I looked back at the gas pump when the clicking stopped when I was filling up my car. I was like, whoa, whoa. Now, I was drained all the time I was there, so having 2 energy drinks had no effect on me. Like, I was still tired and groggy. But once I got to the Florida State Highway, about maybe 30 minutes north towards Hollywood, all my energy came back to me. And before I knew it, I was going like 88 miles an hour. And I felt like I was Billy Mays driving a car. I was like, hi, Billy Mays here! Like all my energy was just coming back to me that quick. And it was a 5.5 hour drive straight to Ocala, nonstop, not looking back. And I could still see whatever it was looking in my eyes with those paintings around its eyes and the fire. At this time, I didn't know what happened yet. So we'll jump onto that. It was 2022 when I went back there for spring break. I wanted to get high. I bought some weed at the gift shop down the street from where I used to bartend. The guy was Cuban with his eyes wide open, diluted like cocaine. He ended up talking me into buying weed that was laced with cocaine, PCP, fentanyl, and ketamine. I'm quite surprised it didn't kill me, but apparently a demonic entity from that apartment followed me up here and shit like that, and then it answered my questions as to what happened in that apartment. So I guess he really wasn't a bad guy. because he did answer my question. So he's basically saying that a Satanist lived there and that someone drew a portal on the floor that I talked about, and then drawing symbols on the walls with blood and doing sacrifices in it. And miraculously, the apartment caught on fire, and the landlords tried to cover it up like nothing happened, but the symbols and the portal on the floor still come up every now and then. And the longer I stayed there, the more powerful it got. And my longest I stayed there was 3 months. Apparently there's like a code for that, like 3, I don't know what it is right now, but people will probably know what I'm talking about. And that was that. I didn't look back. I forgot to shut off my power company. I think I still owe bills to them, but they haven't contacted me in a while. I still owe the rent money that I haven't paid in 2 years. I really don't want to pay them. They told me I was going to get a COVID relief, but they didn't fucking give it to me. I left my router in the car. I didn't even bother returning it to the cable companies, and they were calling me for a couple days about it, and I had to actually mail it back to them, to their nearest internet headquarters. Because my electric company was still signed under my name in that apartment, oddly enough, they didn't charge me for it, but they notified me saying that somebody moved in and that they were going to take my name off of it. But for some reason, I'm still getting notifications about who moved in and moved out. And for what I'm seeing, tenants didn't last long either. The tenant who came in after me moved in about 3 weeks after, but then he only stayed for about 60 days or so, and it was the same with the next tenant. He was only there for 60 or 90 days or so, about as long and short as I was there. But after I came back up here in 2021, things were changing really fast. Like, everything reopened and the mask and lockdown mandates were over, but then inflation skyrocketed, and that's when the trend of nobody wants to work started. Mostly fast food and retail establishments and customer service were the ones in effect, and everybody was arguing and whining about it, but that's because at the time inflation was on the rise and no one could afford to live on minimum wage, let alone $14 an hour at the time. And that was when everything was just changing. But that is the best I could tell this story. I hope everybody liked it. And drop a comment on your thoughts.